We'll finish with two shorter pieces. But before we play them, I'd just like to give you the context of this group. So the young people you see on stage today were some of our very first participants at Big Noise Govanhill when we started 10 years ago. So I remember when these young people came in on their first day and they were handed the instruments, not the very same ones you see them playing today, but they'd chosen their instruments. So they've made this journey with us at Big Noise, and we're incredibly proud of them. We would like to thank the Scottish Government for their continued investment and support of the Big Noise programmes. Thank you. We've got a more relaxing piece for you now, which is called Now is the Fairest of Roses. And then we'll go into a traditional Scottish tune called High Point Drive.
What a start to our afternoon, delegates. A huge thanks for that wonderful performance. And we will now move on with our programme. Firstly, we will take resolution number 25, which is entitled Addressing Endometriosis. And to propose resolution 25, please welcome Councillor Stacey Devine, followed by Councillor Katie Loudon to second. Welcome, Stacey, and happy birthday.
Thank you. Conference. Imagine opening your eyes in the morning, not knowing if you can get out of bed, not being able to stand up or walk or even dress yourself, not being able to take your kids to school, not being able to cook them dinner, having such heavy periods that you can't even move, you can't even wear what you want. Conference, what if I told you that this has been my experience for the last 20 years? Endometriosis is a disease in which the tissue similar to the lining of the womb grows outside. This leads to inflammation, scar tissue forming in the pelvic region, and severe pain. Current estimates indicate that 1 in 10 women and those assigned female at birth are affected. However, given the levels of underdiagnosis of endometriosis, these figures simply cannot reflect the reality of how prevalent this disease actually is. When it takes 8.5 years to receive a diagnosis, the only thing I can be confident of is the 1 in 10 figure clearly underestimates how many people this affects. Misdiagnosis and the lack of understanding from primary care professionals leaves us feeling belittled and ignored, resulting in ineffective treatment, being forced to try every treatment with no investigation, costing the taxpayers money. Conference, this is sticking a plaster over a gaping wound, and this is unacceptable. I find myself overwhelmed by the roller coaster of emotions I've experienced from being misdiagnosed, misunderstood, and facing delay. Not only has this affected my own well-being, but it's also had a devastating consequence to my children. And it breaks my heart to think that their early arrival to this world was a direct result of the challenges I faced. As a result, I had no alternative choice but to undergo a hysterectomy in April this year, sacrificing my chances to ever have another child. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was driven by my fierce determination to take back control and to live my life to the fullest and be the best version of myself and live pain-free for the first time in 20 years. It's been a constant battle, testing my strength, my resilience, and it's taught me the importance of empathy, the power of advocating for myself, and the incredible support for my other endo warriors out there across Forth Valley and the West Lothian. Hi, amazing women. But no longer can we suffer in silence, nor should we have to. We demand better awareness, early detection, and accessible treatment options. No one should have to endure this level of pain and suffering that I and countless others have experienced or face the heartbreaking consequences of it. Conference, we can do better. Passing this resolution and making it SNP policy will improve awareness, encourage early diagnosis, and will help manage the disease and reduce the long-term burden of its symptoms. Passing this resolution will help equip medical professionals with proper guidelines, diagnosis and treatment, which can be a huge step forward to creating standardised and effective care across Scotland. Conference, it's too late for me, as I am thankfully on the other side to actually be taken serious. But we need to take action now to prevent unnecessary suffering and make sure that it's never too late for anyone else. Today, your vote in favour of this motion sends a strong message to those like me who suffer and have suffered with endometriosis. We see you, we hear you, and we will help you. Join me today, Conference, in making our message clear to those who suffer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Conference to second Resolution 25. I know you will give a very warm welcome to Councillor Katie Loudon. Welcome, Katie. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. Conference, thank you very much for that, first of all. I'm really honoured to second this motion today. Stacey, thank you for bringing this motion to the floor and for speaking so powerfully and personally and passionately about it. And I know that when you did so, you were holding many other people in your mind and in your heart, and you've really done them proud with your words. So, Conference, I've been a wee bit busy over the last few months, and I've done a fair bit of press. And one of the most frequently asked questions which I got was, how did you get into politics? How did you get involved? And part of my story was just post-referendum. I met my friend and colleague, now councillor Janine Kalikis, when she set up Women for Independence Rutherglen, and met now councillor Andrea Cowan. And through that group, we spoke about periods. We spoke about bleeding. We spoke about periods and bleeding, and we did so in the local press, national press, in the council chamber, and at Conference. When I spoke with Stacey about this resolution, and we came to the realisation that in some ways, not always, but in some ways we were gynae twins. And it was one of those chats that women have with each other, when you hear the words coming out of your mouth with a joint and increasing sense of disbelief and weariness, frankly, about the fight to be listened to have symptoms taken seriously, and to have a joined-up approach to treatment and management. Now, excuse me for being a little bit vague here, because this isn't my story, it's a family story. But I had a long phone call recently, a telephone appointment with a fantastic GP. She was patient, she was reassuring, and she was very, very well informed. Now, this isn't necessarily an experience that I expected to share on the stage today, but I have told a lot of people about it since, because she gave a message that my peers and I weren't told at a similar stage of life. Agonising pain is not inevitable, and you shouldn't need to put up with it. Complete disruption to your everyday life is not inevitable, and you shouldn't need to put up with it. Now, my brief anecdote isn't one that should be worthy of note, so let's do something about it. This resolution is very clear in its aims, recognising that this is a multifaceted issue which needs a multifaceted approach. So, Conference, let's agree to back this call for an awareness campaign so that these conversations are easier to have. Let's call for support in our education establishments and in our workplaces. Let's call for more research funding. Let's call for standardised treatment pathways. Conference, thank you very much. I urge you to support this resolution.
Thank you very much, Katie. Delegates, our next speaker speaking in favour of Resolution 25 is Hazel Gardner from Isle of Arran branch. So welcome to Hazel.
Thank you, Conference. Psychosomatic. That's what was written on my medical notes at the age of 16. By that time, from the age of 12, I had experienced cycles of pain rising to a crescendo that turned my face grey with the pain. At the age of 20, believing that I was weak, that it was all in my head, I attended Glasgow Royal Infirmary. And they said to me, there's something happening with women. We don't know what it is, but you've just added 3 new symptoms to the list. I was treated with medication. Shortly thereafter, my sister, who lived abroad at the time, was treated with surgery. Hers has been a pain-free life. My life has been blighted. My life choices and life chances have been radically altered by simply not knowing what was happening to me, by not knowing other people who were experiencing the same thing as me, and by having to constantly cancel memory-making situations, events with friends and family. I could go into the symptoms, but you know, I want to use my one voice to say thank you to the Scottish Parliament, because I sat in the Scottish Parliament at a debate called It's OK to Talk Period. And I learned more there in my Scottish Parliament about what endometriosis is than I had known anywhere else in my experience. It took 34 and a quarter years to diagnose me, and Conference, that situation can't be repeated. If young women know early on what is happening to them, they can be empowered to explore medical pathways that meet their needs. Now, there are needs being met in support groups right across Scotland. I started one called Endo Warriors West Coast in Arran. Look up Endo for your area and you'll find a support group. But it's time for national change. It's time for us all to get on board. It's our sisters, our aunts, our wives, our cousins, our friends. So please, Conference, support the motion, make my one voice your voice, and make a difference and make things better. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much, Hazel. Delegates, I had no cards in seeking to speak against Resolution 25. Can I therefore take it that this is passed by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. That moves us on to resolution number 26, which is entitled Additional Support Needs in Early Education. And to move the motion, I would like to call Councillor Louise McAllister of Ellinan District, a first-time speaker at conference, who will be followed by Councillor Jenny Nicholl. So welcome, Louise.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you to everyone gathered here this afternoon. Although I suspect the imminent arrival and speech from our First Minister might be proving something of a draw. It's not all down to me. Nonetheless, thank you to everyone who took an interest in my resolution around the hugely important issue of deferred entry to primary school for children with a profound disability. This is in addition to the very welcome change in legislation which came into force in August of this year and which allowed for the automatic deferral of children who have not yet reached the age of 5 by the start of the school year and who will have their 5th birthdays within that first school term. The issue around allowing and indeed supporting an additional year of funded early learning and childcare is primarily one of equity across all of Scotland, upholding the principles and values of GERFEC. Now, GERFEC, Getting It Right for Every Child, cites the need for a flexible scaffold of support where it is needed and for as long as it is needed. As things stand, there is indeed flexibility within current legislation, as defined in the Education Scotland Act of 1980, which enables education authorities to provide access to provision that is out with the statutory entitlement as defined through the 2014 Act. And therefore, happily, some local authorities do indeed support and offer children with complex medical needs in exceptional circumstances and on a case-by-case basis the opportunity to access an additional funded year of early learning and childcare. However, this is discretionary. Other local authorities will not embed best practice for those very families and their children who most need that inclusive, transformative, and life-affirming support. You see, conference, this additional time spent in an early years setting has the potential to allow for a full further year of growth and development, cognitive, physical, social and emotional growth, meaning the child at the centre can then have the best chance of progressing through their education successfully and onto a happy and productive childhood and adulthood. Curriculum for Excellence means we have moved on to a model of play-led learning for primary 1 and then even into primary 2 classes, which should indeed allow for a smooth and comfortable transition from a nursery setting. However, it is beyond these initial years that my interests lie. In particular, I'm thinking of those key moments of transition to the latter years at primary, when notwithstanding child-led learning, the focus naturally becomes more structured, more academic, and may also happily include those all-important school trips and time away from a familiar school base. Then there is the transition to secondary education, with all that this brings, the added opportunities alongside the challenges that being within a much larger cohort can bring. And so if we are to support all our citizens to become successful learners, confident individuals, responsible citizens and effective contributors, as enshrined in Curriculum for Excellence, then we must do all we can to provide all our citizens with the best possible opportunity to achieve all that they can. And this might mean, for some of our children, the opportunity for one additional year of funded early learning and childcare that should not be dependent on where they happen to live. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child states that in Article 3, the best interests of the child must be a top priority in all decisions and actions that affect children. And in Article 29, education must develop every child's personality, talents and abilities to the full. And so I ask, conference, that all local authorities be compelled to offer support to families and children moving into mainstream education. And should it be identified as providing the best opportunity for additional growth and development, and that it is in the child's best interests access to 1 additional year of funded early learning and childcare prior to entering primary 1. It is my firmly held belief that we must support all our citizens to achieve through lifelong learning, and that this begins with the very earliest of years in early years education. Friends, I urge you to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. Conference to second, Resolution 26. Please welcome Councillor Jenny Nicholl, and Jenny will be followed by Duncan Mitchell. Welcome, Jenny.
Thanks, Kirsten, and good afternoon, friends. I'm grateful to stand before conference today to second Louise's motion. Every year, we, in our role as local councillors and as members of the Education and Children's Services Committee, are approached by families who are struggling with a system that isn't yet ready to support their child into school. They see their friends and neighbours in an authority bordering ours access this crucial opportunity, whilst they are mired in gatekeeping. This cannot be a fair system for all, which is surely what we in Scotland are striving to achieve. Conference, I wish the families tangled up in these exceptional and difficult processes could be here with me today before you. I wish you could hear, as we do, their pleas for equity, their concerns for the welfare of their children as they advocate for complex medical needs, and to hear how exasperated they are with a system which does not meet the needs of their child. Very few children need the benefit of an additional year. But families are faced with unprecedented levels of stress and uncertainty for weeks, months, and years as they battle an unfair system. An unfair system which doesn't seem to have the welfare and needs of their child at the heart. As Louise spoke about, getting it right for every child is our commitment to provide all children, young people, and their families with the right support at the right time. This is so that every child and young person in Scotland can reach their potential. And whilst we're discussing an additional year of early years childcare for a very small number of children, the transition from nursery to primary education is just one of many positive outcomes for them. It can be seen when children develop positive friendships and experience peer support, work upon building confidence and resilience when they go on residential school trips, and this continues as children transition from primary to secondary and beyond. But we need to listen to our early years practitioners, to our classroom teachers, to utilise a multi-agency approach, respecting our professional opinions of all those working with children and their families in order to achieve the best possible outcome for the child. There is already flexibility for local authorities to achieve this, but we seek equity across all of our local authorities and equity of opportunity across Scotland to get it right for every child. Thank you, Conference, and I urge you to support the resolution.
Thank you very much, Jenny. To follow Jenny speaking in favour of the resolution, please welcome Duncan Mitchell from Dundee Pitcairn branch. And Duncan will be our final speaker on this resolution. Welcome, Duncan.
Thank you, Convener. It's a great honour to be speaking on this important resolution. Young children are really important to us delegates. They are the lifeblood of all our futures, and especially on early care, which this resolution's about. It's really important, delegates, that this resolution is passed, because the parents of these young children need help, especially. I know that's not on there, Convener, but they need our help as well. delegates, as if it's not for these parents sacrificing what they do for these young children, they wouldn't have the freedoms that they have today, delegates. And I think that's really important. But I'm sure, like you, delegates, we are keen to hear from those for our next resolution. So I'm going to leave it there. But thank you, convener, and thank you, delegates. Please
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Duncan. And Duncan was another of the excellent first-time speakers we have had at this conference. I have no cards in to speak against Resolution 26, so I wonder if that is passed by acclaim. Thank you very much, Conference. We'll move now on to resolution number 27, which is entitled History of South Asian Soldiers. Resolution 27 will be moved by Amjad Bashir from Scots Asians for Independence and seconded by Alexandra McRae of Arbroath and District Branch. So welcome to Amjad.
Good afternoon, delegates. I want to introduce a lady who's 100 years old, Isabel Harling. And she's an amazing woman because she spent 60 years of her life tending to the 9 graves of British Indian Army soldiers who are buried at Kinussi Cemetery. And these soldiers belonged to the 4th K6 Regiment. And when people ask Isabel, why have you spent so much time looking after these graves? The answer is very simple. Her brother got killed in Second World War in Belgium, and she said, other people are looking after my brother, and it's quite right that I look after my boys. And that's how she describes them, my boys. Hard to believe, I'm 55 years old. I know I look much younger. But for most of my life, I did not know about the British Indian Army and their contribution in World Wars I and II. There were soldiers that came from pre-partitioned India, which is modern Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and other countries. And they consisted of Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Gurkhas, Christians, people of other faiths and no faith. They fought along the Allied troops in World Wars I and II. 4 million British Indian soldiers served along the British and the Allied forces. 160,000 made the biggest sacrifice, their lives. 250,000 were injured. 39 of these soldiers were awarded the highest bravery award, that's the Victoria Cross. And in Scotland, we have a unique deep connection with these soldiers because 1,700 of them were stationed here in the Highlands. So Glasgow's claim that they were the first to have curry, I dispute that because curry was in the Highlands well before that. And they had full lives here, and 14 of those soldiers are buried here, or 14 of those soldiers passed away here in Scotland. And out of these 1,700 soldiers, half of them were evacuated from Dunkirk. So they took part in every front, from the Western Front to the East to the African. So they made a huge contribution, and military historians will say clearly, had it not been for the contribution of these soldiers, the outcome of the war would have been probably very different. Another sort of claim to fame we have is the Tin Church in Laird, which is reported to be the first, most northern mosque in the Western Hemisphere because that was the first makeshift mosque. Quite simply, we've got a very rich history. As someone who was brought up in this country, I didn't know that. The question of belonging was always asked me, and for other people similar to myself, what have you contributed to this country? This rich history has been missing from our school curriculums. It's not taught. And it's time now that we address that and we acknowledge the sacrifice of these forgotten heroes. And on that note, I want to acknowledge the great work of Colourful Heritage, particularly the founder, Omar Sheikh, who has spent the last decade championing this and realizing the work that's been, the sacrifices that have been made. And hopefully we'll see a memorial outside Kelver Grove Museum to mark the British Indian Army sacrifice. So quite simply, we need our curriculum. At the moment, our curriculum, the history that's taught about the British Raj, colonization, it's very different from what really happened. And we have to address that. We have to recognize these contributions. And why is it so important? To highlight to the present and next generation the shared history we have that's forgotten and the shared future we have. It shows that Asians, South Asians have a stake in this land, and it gives them a sense of belonging, and it helps shape their identity. And it's also a hard-hitting against the anti-migrant narrative that's often portrayed by the far right and the Tories. So, conference, I ask you today to pass this motion, not just for us, not for those people that went before us, but those that come after us. Let the sacrifices of these brave men and women not be forgotten, and let it be taught in our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amjad. The conference to second resolution number 27. Please welcome Alexandra McRae of Arbroath and District Branch, who will be followed by Councillor Jean Maxwell. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow delegates. The Indian Army, also called the British Indian Army, was involved in World War I as part of the British Empire. Over 1 million Indian troops served overseas, of whom 62,000 died and another 67,000 were wounded. In total, at least 74,187 Indian soldiers died during the war. In British India also declared war on Nazi Germany. India, as part of the Allied nations, sent over 2.5 million soldiers to fight under British command against the Axis powers. But this motion really rightly raises wider motions than the sacrifices of soldiers from the Asian subcontinent in the two world wars. Incidentally, Field Marshal Sir Claude Auchinleck, commander of the Indian Army from 1942, asserted that the British couldn't have come through both World Wars I and II if they hadn't had the Indian Army. Firstly, it was not just British Asians who were dragged into a war sparked off by the murder of an obscure Austrian Archduke in Sarajevo in 1914, whose existence, by the way, was of no relevance outside the bounds of Europe. But Africans and Caribbeans who lived under the then British flag were also dragged into this conflict. Furthermore, hundreds of thousands of French Africans from West Africa and the Maghreb served in the French army as tirailleurs sénégalais and spahis. It is doubtful if the French could have held Verdun but for the sacrifices of their black and Arab troops. Incidentally, the first shot fired in World War I, not many people know this, and I'm not Michael Caine, as perhaps you've noticed, was fired not by a white man in Flanders Field, but what is now the Volta region of Ghana, when Sergeant Major Alhaji Grunshi of the West African Rifles led his troops into what was then German Togoland. As the previous speaker has pointed out, this motion raises not just issues of military history, but the way our general history is taught in Scotland. Young Asian Scots may have to plough through accounts of the killing times when Cameronians struggled with Claverhouse and Tam Dalyell on the moors of Lanarkshire, and of the Industrial Revolution in Scotland, wondering how this relates to them, without hearing, for instance, how the jute trade forged links between Dundee and India. And until history books are rewritten to be inclusive of the Scotland of today, we are failing to serve our young people and tell them what a diverse people we have become. I have a suggestion. Why don't we, as a first step, have a major event when we invite academics from our universities and representatives of our Asian, African and Chinese communities to do a presentation for all to attend, publicising the stories of Scotland's newer communities and how Asian, African and Oriental Scots came to enrich our society in the 20th and 21st centuries and before, and how the stories of Andrew Watson, the black engineer and footballer who captained Scotland to victory in 1881, in the days when we managed to defeat England, and of Dr. Jainty Das Sagar, the first non-white Scottish councillor in Dundee. These stories need to be told, and academics need to take account of the modern history of Scotland to be inclusive of the different and diverse society we have become.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And Conference, our final speaker on Resolution 27 is Councillor Jean Maxwell of Trossachs and Teeth Branch.
Good afternoon, Conference. I'm also a first-time speaker here, which is, I know you've not all come to hear me, so I won't speak for very long. But I'll introduce myself. I was 43 years in the Army. I finished a couple of years ago, and I'm now a councillor at Stirling Council, where, among other jobs, I'm the Veterans Champion. So I'm going to give a quick plug to Veterans Champions here. There's one in every single local authority. So if you have an issue, relating to veterans, then seek out the Veterans Champion within the council to make sure that everything the council can possibly do is being done to support the veteran community. I am delighted today to be able to support this historic contribution by soldiers from South Asia and, in fact, the Commonwealth in general. I served on a number of overseas operations. I had next to me 64 Fijians on one operation, guys from South Africa, from Ghana, from Kenya, from right across the Commonwealth, as we'd now call it. 7% of the British Army, as it stands now, consists of Commonwealth soldiers, whether they are Nepalis, the Gurkhas, or those Fijians, and all the rest of them. And I'll give another plug to the Fijians. Having 64 Fijians in your battalion gives your rugby team a great boost. We were lucky enough to have 3 Fijian internationals on the team. We beat Japan as a minor nation. Well done, the Royal Scots. We still do not look after Commonwealth veterans anything like as well as we should. These are guys now, not in 1945, now. The Tory government buckled slightly under massive pressure, even from within their own ranks, and allowed Commonwealth soldiers having served 6 years to become citizens. And after that, another major fight, they buckled and allowed them not to have to pay for that citizenship. They charged them £2,389 each to become British citizens. shocking, after they'd put their lives on the line. They still charge those soldiers £2,389 for their wife, for their children, for their husband, whoever it is, to join. Some of those families, if they want to take up a proper offer of British citizenship, are being charged £10,000. It's criminal. It's criminal. So I would urge that we continue to work on trying to improve on that. And I'm going to finish on this sad note of the absolutely vile treatment of the interrupters, the interpreters, and the staff who stood next to us on those battlefields. They were not technically soldiers, but they were wearing our uniforms. They were talking our voice to the locals. They were interrupting over my shoulder to talk to people that I was trying to say something to. We abandoned the Afghan interpreters, that many of them are still stuck in Afghanistan. Those who are here now are being thrown out of hotels and being told that they're going to have to make their own way with no food, no assistance whatsoever, no recourse to the public purse. That is awful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jean. So Jean was our final speaker on resolution number 27. I have no cards in to speak against this resolution, and no cards in for the amendment. So the amendment will necessarily fall, but for the resolution with no cards in against, can I take it that it is passed by acclaim?
Since its birth in 1934, the SNP has been the party of Scottish independence. Generation after generation, our members have believed in Scotland and its people. All of us, together, stand on the shoulders of giants. We've pounded the streets in every single corner of Scotland. And with each conversation, with each door knock, slowly but surely, we've shifted public opinion. From the days when it was maybe a little less fashionable to support independence, to today, where we are Scotland's party of government. We are within touching distance of our dream, an independent Scotland. That is real progress. But nobody said it would be easy. We're always going to be bumps in the road. And that's why we must keep the heat. We owe it to those who came before us and for those who are yet to come. The many voices that make up our movement are our greatest strength. It's your graft and commitment that will deliver independence for Scotland. We may not have started this movement, but let's get on with it and finish the job.
Thank you very much, delegates. This moves us on to our topical and emergency resolutions, of which we have 3 this afternoon. They are entitled Cost of Living Crisis, Drug Law Reform Proposals and Automatic Voter Registration. The text of all of the resolutions is on the website. It will be displayed on the screens at the side of the hall, and I will read out each resolution before we go into the debate. So while I am reading out the text of resolution, topical resolution number 1, Cost of Living Crisis, can I call Anne McLaughlin MP to be ready to propose and Colette Stevenson MSP to be ready to second? Thank you. So the text of the topical resolution entitled Cost of Living Crisis reads, Conference notes the UK is experiencing the biggest squeeze on living standards on record, driven by over a decade of Tory austerity and economic mismanagement. Condemns both the Labour and Conservative Party for failing to present a clear programme to tackle the ongoing cost of living crisis. Conference welcomes the publication of the Poverty in Scotland 2023 report by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, acknowledges its findings and recommendations to the UK and Scottish governments, which draw attention to the over 1 million people experiencing poverty in Scotland. Conference condemns the UK government's record on poverty, which, according to the JRF report, is bad and has made things worse. Reiterates calls for Westminster to use its significant powers over employment law, equalities legislation and social security in Scotland to poverty-proof the labour market and ensure that people's basic needs are guaranteed. Highlights Scottish Government spending of almost £3 billion on measures to help mitigate the impact of the cost of living crisis on households, acknowledges the Scottish Government's anti-poverty measures, such as the game-changing Scottish Child Payment, which are lifting an estimated 90,000 children in Scotland out of poverty this year and continue to be a lifeline for many, agrees that Scotland can no longer afford to be in a union which entrenches income inequality whilst undermining social justice, and calls for the Scottish Government to ensure its upcoming independence paper on social security includes plans for an essentials guarantee. And with that, welcome to the platform Anne McLaughlin MP to propose the resolution.
Conference, many of my constituents were already living in financial crisis when this crisis, am I that small? It's quite unnerving. When this crisis came about, now many, many more are experiencing it. Some of them are experiencing it for the first time. And yes, that might mean that they have to go without a holiday, but why should they have to go without a holiday? People work hard, but the people I'm very concerned about are those that were already struggling, and now they have been plunged into a catastrophic living nightmare. Now, we are told that the lesson of Rutherglen is that independence is not a priority and the cost of living is, but it's not quite as simple as that. The priority for people is to get out of this nightmare. The priority is to find a way out, and they will do whatever it takes, and they will vote however they believe is the quickest route to get them out of it. Now, clearly, for us, the route out of it can only be independence, and that is our job, is to convince people of that. So, who are these people? Well, it's the 123,000 pensioner households in Scotland who are on such a low income that they are entitled to pension credit, but they do not apply for it. 123,000 households in Scotland not applying for their pension credit. In Glasgow North East alone, that means £7 million is going back to the UK Treasury instead of being in the pocket of my constituents. And my message to them and anyone who might be entitled is claim it. It is not charity. It is your entitlement. Claim it, please. It's also the people on prepayment meters now. I've been campaigning on that, and Conference has supported me in the past on that. And I've been doing it because people on prepayment meters pay higher standing charges than us, than the rest of us. They pay higher per unit costs than the rest of us. And when they run out of money, they are automatically cut off. And to add insult to injury, some 280,000 of them did not get the £400 energy support that we all got. And the reason is because they made it so difficult for them, whereas we all got it automatically added on, taken from our bills. The last group of people that I want to talk about are people living in food poverty. I am absolutely furious that last year at least 500,000 people in Scotland accessed a food bank or similar in that year at least once. Why should they have to do that? That is just so unfair. And I want to pay tribute to those organisations that do support them, and particularly to the Scottish Pantry Network. I'm a board member of it, but it's an organisation that doesn't give food away. It allows you to buy at a very much reduced cost, and it puts the dignity back into food provision. It was set up by a former SNP councillor, Mandy Morgan, who's the driving force behind it, and I pay credit to her for that. Now, all of this could be fixed with independence. Independence is not a magic word. It's the only way that we can properly tackle all of these problems that people simply should not be facing in our very wealthy country. The evidence is there. The Scottish Government gives us that evidence with the policies that they implement with one hand tied behind their back. They demonstrate their belief that people have the right to dignity and that they are doing everything they can. They're paying the bedroom tax. They've introduced the Scottish Child payment and many more, as I'm sure Colette will outline. And I would pay tribute to the work of the MSPs, not just the government, but the MSPs, and particularly people like Colette, who you'll hear from shortly. Now, it follows that with the powers of independence, they will fully tackle the impact of these awful UK policies. It could also be fixed under the union. I know it's controversial to say that, but it could. The trouble is, nobody wants to. The Tories could fix it, just like they fixed it for the billions fraudulently claimed by their Tory pals during the pandemic to be written off, to be magicked away. Labour could fix it. And sadly, some people believe that Labour will fix it, but they will not even commit to their original stance of opposition to the two-child limit, for goodness sake. So clearly they are not going to fix it. So yes, under the union it could all be fixed, but it's not going to be. And so the only way we can properly address scandals like older people in poverty, folk unable to eat or heat or wash their clothes or charge their phones, the only way that can be properly addressed and the essentials in life guaranteed, as in the Joseph Rowntree report, is if we give up on that union and get our independence. We know that, Conference. We have one job. We have one job, and that is to use the evidence that we've got to convince people that this is the best and, in reality, the only route out of their nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And to second this topical resolution, please welcome Colette Stevenson, MSP, to be followed by Dr. Shelley-Ann Brown.
Conference, and can I just add thanks very much, Anne, and equally the MPs here do a fantastic job as well. So usually I'd be saying I'm pleased to be seconding this resolution with my colleague Anne Glockland MP, but the truth is I'm not. People across Scotland are paying a steep price for economic incompetence. Austerity and Brexit caused by successive Westminster governments, but none more so than the current UK Tory government. Tories are entrenching poverty while forcing millions more into destitution with their failure to get a grip of rising costs and inflation. The cost of living crisis is causing thousands of premature deaths in the UK and significantly widening the wealth and health gap between the richest and the poorest. Conference, as the convener of the Social Justice Committee in the Scottish Parliament, I hear daily about the impact of cruel Tory-created cost of living crisis. Millions of Scots, and indeed people across the UK, have been hit hard with levels of inflation not seen since the 1970s as a result of the war in Ukraine, COVID, Brexit and economic policy. Poor households have borne that brunt as they spend a larger proportion of their income on energy, the cost of which has soared. A new modelling study by the BMG suggests premature deaths, people dying before they reach 75, will rise by 6.5% this year due to the cost of living crisis, with 30 extra deaths per 100,000 people. This is unacceptable in a modern, supposedly democratic nation. Scotland can and must do better. But Conference, we're doing this with one hand tied behind our back. The Scottish Government spends over £750 million each year mitigating the impact of cruel UK Tory policies like the bedroom tax and two-child cap. Conference, the SNP is the only party offering real help with the cost of living through progressive policies like the Scottish Child Payment. New analysis shows that 90,000 fewer children will live in poverty as a result of the actions of this SNP Scottish Government this year. A key action is, of course, the unique Scottish Child Payment, which the Trussell Trust suggests has helped to slow the pace of demand for emergency food parcels last year. These are the policies of a caring Scottish Government, and they are in sharp contrast to the UK. Thank you. Sorry, Convener. The SNP Government is doing all it can within its limited powers and budget, and only with independence can we tackle the cost of living crisis and get rid of unelected Westminster governments for good. So let's send a resounding message to the UK Tory government that the people of Scotland have had enough of 13 years of economic mismanagement, of harsh and cruel policies, and of their right-wing rhetoric. Please support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colette. And our final speaker on this topical resolution is Dr. Shelley-Ann Brown. So welcome, Shelley-Ann.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, Conference. Now, I wholeheartedly support this motion and for our independence paper on social security to indeed include plans for an essentials guarantee. Why? Because poverty comes at a significant cost to households in need, but also to our economy and public services such as our NHS. Research has shown that even as of this year, 90% of low-income households that are on universal credit are currently going without basic essentials because of Westminster's cost of living crisis. They're actually having to choose between food and clothing, between food and electric and gas. Now, what an essentials guarantee does is it reforms universal credit to at least, at a minimum, ensure those who need it can afford the essentials. That's our food, electric and gas, water, clothing, toiletries, particularly in hard times. Please, Conference, support this motion. Let's ensure that those at minimum, the basic essentials for those who are in need are met. By supporting this motion, you're simply assuring thousands, hundreds of thousands of low-income households that their universal credit basic rate is always at least enough to afford all of the essentials that they will need to lead a good life. Please support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelley-Ann. So Shelley-Ann was our final speaker on topical resolution cost of living crisis. I have no cards in against, so can I take it that this topical resolution is passed by acclaim? Thank you very much. Delegates, before we move on to the second of our topical resolutions, I have the results of the internal elections. I will go through the results of the National Office Bearer posts for committee positions. These will be published on the website along with the full results detail. So, taking them in order, for the post of President, Graham McCormick received 79 votes. Michael Russell received 599 votes, and Michael Russell is therefore elected. For the position of National Treasurer, Stuart MacDonald received 556 votes, Douglas Thompson received 104 votes, and Stuart MacDonald is therefore elected. For the position of National Secretary, David Burkett received 76 votes, Lorna Finn received 332 votes, Kelly Parry received 253 votes, and Lorna Finn is therefore elected. For the position of Policy Development Convener, I'm going to tell you about 2 rounds of voting. So in the first round of voting, Marco Biaggi received 305 votes, Andrew Ewan received 70 votes, Chris Hanlon received 117 votes, Vary Love received 153 votes. Taking it to the second round, Marco Biaggi received 329 votes, Chris Hanlon 141 votes, and Vary Love 164 votes. So Marco Biaggi is therefore elected. For the position of Member Support Convener, again, I will tell you about 2 rounds of voting. So Alec Bellich received 243 votes in the first round, Adrian Doherty 190 votes, Norman MacLeod 175 votes. So taking that to the second round, Alexander Bellich received 291 and Adrian Doherty received 248 votes. So Alexander Bellich is duly elected. For the position of Equalities Convener, Summer Chen received 348 votes, Amber Roberts received 218 votes. Summer Chen is duly elected. For the role of BAME Convener, Shelley-Ann Brown received 353 votes and Faiza Iklak received 198 votes. So Shelley-Ann Brown is duly elected. For the position of Disabled Members Convener, Jonathan McCall received 188 votes. Andy Stewart received 365 votes. Andy Stewart is duly elected. 3 positions were unopposed. The Organisation Convener is Jen Layden, the Local Government Convener is John Alexander, and the Women's Convener is Katie Hagman. So congratulations to them all. And well done to all candidates who put themselves forward. So thank you very much for that conference. So that takes us on now to the second of our topical and emergency resolutions. This one is entitled Drug Law Reform Proposals, and I will read out the text to you. You will also be able to see it on the screen at the side. So, drug law reform proposals. The text reads, Conference believes that the number of drug deaths and level of harm caused by drugs in Scotland is unacceptable and that every life lost to addiction is a tragedy. Conference recognises the vital importance of Scotland's national mission to reduce deaths and improve lives impacted by drugs and welcomes the action the Scottish Government is taking to tackle this public health emergency. Conference believes that whilst the Scottish Government is working hard within devolved powers to reduce drug deaths, its public health approach is simply at odds with the UK's legal framework within which it must currently operate. Conference notes the recent announcement by the Lord Advocate that it would not be in the public interest for people using a pilot safer drug consumption room to face prosecution for possession within the facility, and welcomes that the first drug consumption room has since been given the green light in Glasgow. Conference recognises that due to the Reserved Misuse of Drugs Act, this service would still be limited to some extent, but are confident it would save lives. Conference further welcomes the Scottish Government's publication of A Caring, Compassionate and Human Rights informed drug policy for Scotland, which includes a number of proposals on drug law reform, including decriminalisation of all drugs for personal supply. Conference calls on the UK Government to engage constructively with the Scottish Government to implement these progressive proposals or to provide Scotland with the further powers required to achieve the necessary reforms to reduce drug deaths and harm. So that is the text of the topical resolution entitled Drug Law Reform Proposals. And to move this resolution, please welcome Alison Thewlis MP.
Good afternoon, Conference. Every life lost to drugs is a tragedy and has a ripple effect through our communities. Conference, can we recognise and send our love and condolences to everybody who has lost a loved one to drugs? Thank you. The challenge Scotland faces is complex and requires us to work on multiple fronts. There is no single answer, no single solution, and I pay particular tribute to Angela Constance MSP and Eleanor Whittam MSP on their approach so far. Scotland's approach to naloxone and to the medication-assisted treatment standards has indeed been praised by the Home Affairs Select Committee at Westminster, and I recognise the work also by colleagues in Glasgow who have done so much to progress this agenda. But Scotland's ability, Conference, to tackle this public health issue is hampered by the outdated 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act. There are very few people in this world who think that this is a good piece of legislation, but unfortunately, they tend to be the people in charge of the Home Office. Deeply disappointing, therefore, that as on so many issues, Labour and the Tories are indistinguishable on drug law reform. Instead of listening to the evidence on drugs, they're only listening to the Daily Mail. The consequence of this rhetoric-based policy is seen in the people in my constituency injecting drugs in filthy back lanes, in bin sheds and on waste ground, risking infection and risking their own lives. But it is also putting our communities at risk in dealing with overdoses and literally picking up the used needles that get left behind. Conference, we believe in treating people with dignity and respect. We believe in treating addiction as a public health issue, not a criminal justice issue. It need not be a political issue at all. I'm very glad that the Lord Advocate has taken the view that it would not be in the public interest to prosecute those using a safer drugs consumption facility in Glasgow, which we dearly hope to open soon. Over 100 of these operate around the world, proven to reduce harm and to save lives. But Conference, we should never have to ask the permission of a government we did not elect to save the lives of our people. An independent Scotland would do what Westminster will not. We will reform our drug laws. Please support the resolution.
Thank you very much, Alison. And to second this topical resolution, please welcome Emma Harper, MSP.
Thank you, Convener. Conference. As Alison has mentioned, any life lost as a result of drug harm is an absolute tragedy. And the Scottish Government is absolutely committed to implementing approaches that we know that work to save the lives and reduce harm. The Drugs Deaths Task Force, it published its report, Changing Lives, and it made 20 recommendations and 139 detailed actions for the Scottish Government to consider. And the report was a culmination of nearly 3 years of work with contributions from a broad range of people, including those with lived and living experience. And the Scottish Government has absolutely taken all the actions within its current powers to support those with drug addiction. But however, as with many areas, we are constrained by a completely out-of-touch UK government. Instead of criminalising members of our community, our brothers, our sisters, our children, right, our wains and our friends, we need a public health approach that supports those with addictions and prevents unnecessary deaths. Now, Alison has already highlighted a lot, so I will skip forward and not go into further detail and repeat. But I know the Minister for Drugs Policy has written to the UK Minister to express opposition to the UK Government's proposals, which will further criminalise folk. You know, we absolutely need to not do that. You know, we need to be tackling stigma. We need to be supporting people into recovery. We need to be helping them in many ways with a multi-pronged approach using whatever tools we have in our toolkit. I'm keen on the issues around the reversal agent for benzodiazepine overdose, which is similar to naloxone. And I know this reversal agent because I used it when I was a recovery room nurse to reverse benzodiazepine overdose. And we know that the drugs the Misuse of Drugs Act is completely out of date, and without reform of the law, efforts to tackle the drugs crisis in Scotland will always be impeded. We are constantly being impeded by a UK government that we didn't vote for. So what I'm going to encourage you all to do, Conference, is support this motion so that we can do all we can in Scotland with our policies that we need to get the UK government to change their policy so that we can help tackle drug deaths in Scotland. Conference, please support this resolution.
Thank you very much, Emma. Delegates, I have no cards in seeking to speak against this resolution, so can I take it that it is passed by acclaim? Thank you very much. Conference, we had hoped to take a third topical resolution. I'm afraid that the clock has beaten us on this occasion, but I'm sure people are already thinking about submitting it for the next conference. So thank you. Point of order, Keith Brown.
I just said that to see the blind panic in Kirsten's eyes. For those that have read the reports of the business convener, you realise that Kirsten is standing down after this conference from that position. What you won't realise, I'm sure, is the time that Kirsten has put in during a very difficult time for the party over the past number of years. Huge numbers of hours and effort.
That was unexpected. Thank you, Keith, for making me cry. And it has been a privilege to do this job for the last 5 years. So thank you, delegates, for allowing me to do this. And with that, let me welcome to the platform Shona Robertson, Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Deputy First Minister.
Thank you. Well, thank you, and very well-deserved flowers, if I may say so myself. You've done a great job. Conference, it's great to finally get here. Pleased to be here. Taking a while. And I'm especially pleased to be given the opportunity to introduce our leader and First Minister. Before I do so, though, let me say this. It's a tough and unrelenting job being First Minister. It takes up every minute of every day. Now, no real surprise there, I hear you say. Imagine, though, on top of that huge responsibility, that you're also worrying day in, day out about your close family members being in one of the most dangerous places on earth. Trying to comfort your wife and kids while being beside yourself with worry and yet still getting on with the job of being First Minister and party leader. Conference, this is what this man, our First Minister and party leader, has been coping with over the last week. And I can tell you this, Conference, I'm very proud of Hamza, who has shown enormous strength and calm, measured leadership at a time when, my goodness, this is so badly needed. He has been a true statesman on his response to this terrible humanitarian disaster. So, Conference, please give a very warm welcome to my friend, our party leader and our First Minister, Hamza Yusuf.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. She almost made me greet. Started. Delegates, this is a party that I consider my home, full of people I see as my extended family. And I have never felt the love, kindness, and solidarity of the SNP family as much as I have over the last 10 days. So on my behalf, on behalf of Nadia, on behalf of my girls, perhaps most importantly, on behalf of our family that is in Gaza, from the bottom of our hearts, we say thank you to each and every single one of you. What we are witnessing in the Middle East is truly heartbreaking. Imagine waking up on a Saturday morning during one of your holy festivals, as families right across Israel did last week, to find that your loved ones had been murdered or kidnapped by Hamas terrorists. It is beyond words, and to, of course, be condemned in the strongest possible manner. Or imagine living in the Gaza Strip under constant bombardment right now. No food, no water, no power. Friends, tragically, we don't have to imagine. This is the reality for Israeli and Palestinian families alike. Too many innocent men, women, and children are suffering. The hostages must be released, and a humanitarian corridor must be opened. Vital supplies let in, and Gazans who want to leave must be allowed to leave. The blockade of Gaza must end. Conference, we are absolutely clear. The life of a Palestinian is equal to the life of an Israeli. It is right for the world to condemn the actions of Hamas, unequivocally. But any form of collective punishment, as we're seeing in Gaza, can never be justified. 2.2 million innocent people cannot pay the price for the actions of Hamas. And here at home, to Scotland's Jewish, Muslim, and Palestinian communities, you are communities that I love. And I want you to know, as First Minister, as a fellow human being, I share the pain and I share the sorrow that you're feeling. I've attended your synagogues, your churches, your mosques, your communities I've grown up with, I've danced with, I've laughed with, and in this last week, that I have shed many a tear with. Each and every person in Scotland, from all of the vibrant communities of our nation, must feel safe here. And as long as I'm First Minister, let me be abundantly clear. There is no room for anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or hatred of any kind here in Scotland. What did I say about making me Greek? Conference, the great American writer, Toni Morrison said this: "No more apologies for a bleeding heart when the opposite is no heart at all. Danger of losing our humanity must be met with more humanity." In the past, people in Scotland and across the UK have opened our hearts and our homes. We've welcomed those from Syria, from Ukraine, and many other countries. Conference, we must do so again. There are currently 1 million people displaced within Gaza. So therefore, I'm calling today on the international community to commit to a worldwide refugee program for the people of Gaza. I'm calling on the UK government to take 2 urgent steps. Firstly, they should immediately begin work on the creation of a refugee resettlement scheme for those in Gaza who want to and, of course, are able to leave. And when they do so, Scotland is willing to be the first country in the UK to offer safety and sanctuary to those who are caught up in these terrible attacks. Conference, my brother-in-law is a doctor in Gaza. When we can get through to him on the phone, he tells us of scenes of absolute carnage. Hospitals running out of medical supplies, doctors, nurses, having to make the most difficult decision of all: who to treat and who to let die. That can't be allowed, not in this day and age. So I therefore urge the UK government to support the medical evacuation of injured civilians in Gaza. And let me be clear. Scotland is ready to play her part, and our hospitals will treat the injured men, women, and children of Gaza where we can. Delegates, I joined the SNP almost 20 years ago because I could see that it was an outward-looking, an internationalist party, resolute in its support for human rights right around the world. Today, those values have never been more important, so that we can make our contribution abroad and build the fairer society we know is possible right here at home. This is meant to be a rich country, yet it feels like too many are struggling, no matter how hard they work. It can seem like society is becoming even more polarized, when frankly, there is a lot more common ground than we realize. People see all this, and they want to know who has a plan to make their lives better, to make Scotland a fairer, a more prosperous country. Delegates, if we, the SNP, want to continue to be trusted by the people of Scotland, and if we want to take them on our journey to independence, then we need to show them that we have the answers to these questions. A couple of weeks ago, we had a tough night in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election. Now, we can either spend time feeling sorry for ourselves, or we can take another course of action. Let me tell you what that is. We roll up our sleeves, we work harder than ever before for the people of Scotland, and this is how I'm going to lead this party forward. It starts by standing by our values, sticking up for what we believe in, and always, every day, standing up for the people of Scotland. Friends, we have used our time in government to cement our social contract with the people. A contract that says, yes,
Those who earn the most should pay the most. But a social contract in which everyone benefits, regardless of wealth. I'm proud this SNP-led government, Scottish Government, has brought our rail back into public ownership. A rail service that is run for people, not run for profit, and a rail service under this SNP government that has scrapped peak time fares. We've abolished prescription charges. We've made sure our NHS staff are the best paid in the UK. And now our brilliant social care workers will be paid at least £12 an hour. We've invested in our schools, more teachers and higher spending per pupil than anywhere in the UK. We've seen the biggest ever reduction in the attainment gap on literacy and numeracy in primary schools in a single year. We're helping families with the cost of living at times when they need it the most. Childcare provision, a rent freeze, free bus travel for young people, and conference. Here is another choice the SNP have made. If you're a parent struggling on a low income, you're now entitled to £25 a week thanks to the Scottish Child Payment. When budgets are tight, that's a huge investment for any government to make. But it's the right choice. Do you know what it means? It means an estimated 90,000 fewer children in Scotland are living in poverty this year because of the actions of the SNP government. That's a government that's delivered and delivering for the people of Scotland. And friends, that delivery is, of course, in no small part down to my predecessor. Conference, Nicola Sturgeon transformed Scotland. She reformed Scotland's public services. She improved the life chances of thousands of Scotland's young people. And we will never forget, in the toughest of times our country faced, Nicola was the calmest of voices and the coolest of heads. So for all of this and more, we say thank you, Nicola. Delegates, people are rightly interested in what we have done for them. But if we're going to earn and re-earn their trust, what we're going to do for them in the future is more important. So let me tell you what we're going to do. I'll start with that most pressing of issues, helping people through these difficult times. Nobody in Scotland caused this Westminster cost of living crisis. But almost everybody in Scotland is suffering because of it. And I never thought that in 2023, people on above average salaries would be coming to my constituency surgeries asking for financial help. Nurses, teachers, police officers, these workers, they're the very backbone of Scotland's public services. People like them are being hit by this crisis too. We know that people are filled with dread when bills are going up and up. Now, we can't stop all bills from rising. But where we can act, we absolutely should. I've considered carefully what steps we can take to help. Council tax bills in Scotland are already hundreds of pounds a year lower than they are in England. We're committed to fundamentally reforming local taxation. We'll re-energise our work to do just that. We have consulted on what level the council tax should be next year. At conference, we have listened and we have reached our decision. I can announce to the people of Scotland that next year your council tax will be frozen. And that's the SNP delivering for people when they need it the most. Conference, as well as supporting people during these tough times, we need to do everything we can to support our public services. And there is no more cherished an institution than our National Health Service. The SNP are already providing record funding to our health service. We have the best performing A&E units in the UK. But increased waiting lists are the inevitable consequence of the necessary decisions we had to make during the pandemic. We're working hard to reduce these. We've seen significant reductions in the longest waits since targets were announced last July. We've opened 2 national treatment centres this year in Fife and Highland, dedicated centres for elective procedures. And by the end of this year, we'll expand that capacity with a new centre in Forth Valley and the second phase of NHS Golden Jubilee in Glasgow. But Conference, too many people are still waiting too long for treatment. And that's why I'm announcing today that in each of the next 3 years, we will provide an extra £100 million to cut waiting lists in our NHS. This additional £300 million of investment will allow us to maximise capacity, build greater resilience into the system, and deliver year-on-year reductions in the number of patients who have waited far too long. This will reduce waiting lists by an estimated 100,000 patients by 2026. When our NHS needs us, this party steps up, delivering for patients, delivering for our NHS, and crucially, delivering for Scotland. Conference, we are of course here meeting in Aberdeen, Europe's energy capital. A city that successive Westminster governments, be they Labour or Tory, have used as a cash cow, squandered billions that flowed to the Treasury and barely invested a fraction back. And instead of having a fund that can invest in all of our futures, the people of this city, the people of Aberdeen, are having to fundraise to rejuvenate the very heart of their city. Union Street is the silver mile of Scotland's energy capital. And therefore, I can announce today that the Scottish Government will provide £400,000 to the campaign to rejuvenate Union Street. You see, delegates, this is just the latest in the transformation of Scotland's cities, whether it's here in Aberdeen and with Union Street, St James's Quarter in Edinburgh, the ambitious Clyde mission in the city of Glasgow. New life is being breathed into our urban centres. And in Dundee, a city very close to my heart, the SNP will support the superb regeneration of the disused gas works into a new Eden project, a beacon for regeneration and a beacon for green tourism. Conference, the oil and gas industry, and most crucially, our workers here in the northeast, are absolutely vital to Scotland's economy, and they will be for many years to come. But we also need to look to the future. So a just transition isn't just important for tackling the climate emergency. For that, it absolutely is. It's also a huge economic opportunity. Successful bidders for the Scotland offshore licensing round have indicated that there's the potential for £25 billion to be invested in the Scottish supply chain over the lifetime of Scotland. But we can't just sit back and expect that opportunity to just fall into our laps. We've got to work with industry. And we work with industry We are absolutely determined to create it. So I can therefore announce today that over the next 5 years, the Scottish Government will invest up to £500 million to anchor a new offshore wind supply chain right here in Scotland. A catalyst for additional private investment in our ports and our harbours, supporting inward investment, encouraging domestic companies to seek new opportunities. That's cutting emissions, that's creating sustainable jobs and sending a clear message to global investors that Scotland means business. Delegates, all of us, each and every single one of us in this hall cares deeply about equality. And to the fellow men in the room, we all have a duty, me of course included, to stand up and be counted. Call out abuse and violence women suffer far too often in our society. You know, I was proud to be the Justice Secretary when the Domestic Abuse Act came into force. The conference, there's so much more to do. It takes incredible courage for a survivor of domestic abuse to come forward to ask for help. But often, women feel they can't leave their abusive partner because they don't know how they'll feed themselves or their children. They don't know how they'll be able to put a roof over their heads. I can only imagine how agonizing that must be. That's why today I can announce that we will pilot a new £500,000 fund to support women in this, the most distressing of circumstances. It's called the Fund to Leave. It will be delivered by women's aid groups in the 5 council areas with the highest number of women presenting as homeless due to domestic abuse. Women will receive up to £1,000 to help them pay for the essentials that they and their children need. Because conference, let us in this hall today say to any woman or survivor of domestic abuse that we stand with you. Conference, our nation, it's rich in culture and the arts. Culture is a reflection of who we are. It's also a reflection of who we hope to be as people. We don't just value culture and the arts for the economic impact they bring. We value them for their own sake, for the joy that they bring the world. And delegates, you heard exactly what a joy culture brings to young people earlier this afternoon when you were treated to a brilliant performance by Sistema's Big Noise Govan Hill. And I can tell you, conference, they have more musical ability in their left pinkies than I do in my whole body. But nonetheless, I do want to send a clear signal today about my ambition for culture in Scotland. We're not just going to protect our arts funding. We're not just going to increase it in line with inflation. No, delegates, we're going to go further than that. I can announce today that over the next 5 years, we will invest, and we will more than double our investment in Scotland's arts and culture. This means that by the end of the 5 years, our investment will be £100 million higher than it is today. This is a huge vote of confidence in the future of our culture sector and in the vital work of bodies like Screen Scotland, Creative Scotland, and our festivals. And delegates, politics is about choices. I choose to ensure that Scotland's arts and culture are supported to grow at home and to be seen right across the world. Conference, the choices we make, they're driven by our principles. our convictions, our values. Values, they're not abstract. They determine the practical policies that governments pursue. And those policies can have a profound impact on all of our lives. So let me give you one example of a very different set of values to those that are held by the SNP. At the Tory party conference, the UK Home Secretary warned about what she described as a hurricane of migrants coming to the UK and other Western countries. When I hear that dog whistle language, it makes me shudder. But you know what else it does? It makes me resolve to work even harder for independence, so that Scotland's policies are decided here in Scotland, and our immigration policies can never, ever be decided by extremist Westminster politicians. You see, not only is the anti-migrant rhetoric morally wrong, of that is, it's also bad for our economy. Our migration policy, it'll be based and founded on core principles. It'll be welcoming, it'll be internationalist, it will be compassionate. So let me be clear. We will always speak out against the voices of extremism, against those who want to fuel a culture war. And when we secure independence, the hostile environment will be gone, and it will be gone for good. Friends, it says something, doesn't it, about the modern-day Tory party, that such rhetoric from the Home Secretary is seen as a pitch for the leadership. Suella Braverman's most compassionate moment came when she stood in the tail of a guide dog conference. But to be serious, the Tories making the culture wars their election strategy. Do you know what it says? It says the Tories know they're defeated. They're done. They're finished. Conference, good riddance to them. Now that leaves Labour. And when it comes to values, I've got absolutely no idea what Keir Starmer stands for. When it comes to Keir Starmer, the closer he gets to Downing Street, the further he retreats from his principles. Let me give you an example. Once upon a time, Keir Starmer agreed with the SNP that it was abhorrent to force women who've been raped to provide proof before they could access child benefits. But now, Labour and Sir Keir Starmer say they plan to apply Tory policies, like the rape clause, in their words, more fairly. Delegates, the so-called rape clause is one of the cruelest policies devised by this inhumane Tory government. The only fair thing to do with the rape clause is to abolish it. The rape clause will certainly have no place in an independent Scotland, and frankly, it should have no place in any modern civilised society. Conference, the Tories are finished. Labour has abandoned its principles, but the SNP will always stand by ours. And at our conference on Sunday, we decided together on the process for winning our country's independence. This was a very important debate. But if I can be so bold in a room that is full of committed independent supporters, it's not process arguments that will achieve our goal. Around half of our fellow Scots already support independence. And I have no doubt that we can turn that half into a sustained majority. And we will do so when we concentrate not on the how, but on the why. And we came together on Sunday and we agreed. At the next election, page 1, line 1 of our manifesto will say, vote SNP for Scotland to become an independent country. And the reason that will be page 1, line 1 of our next manifesto is because independence is about building a better Scotland. Independence is not simply an end in itself. It's inextricably linked to the cost of living crisis. It's about raising living standards. It's about protecting our NHS. Above all, it's about a new well-being economy, an economy that works for the people, not the other way round. And on the economy, Keir Starmer says he wants growth, growth, growth. Well, there's a huge problem with that, because he also supports Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. Brexit can't be made to work for Scotland. It has been an unmitigated disaster. And with independence, we can escape the failed UK Brexit-based economy and take our place for the very first time as a member state in our own right of the European Union. Conference, we know that people have suffered because of Westminster crashing the economy. We know the challenges that people are facing every day. But delegates, we do not seek independence for Scotland despite these challenges. We seek independence for Scotland because of them. European countries that are like Scotland are fairer and wealthier than the UK. Ireland, Norway, Denmark, Austria, Finland, and other comparable nations have higher national income per head than the UK. They have higher productivity, lower inequality, lower poverty. So with all of our talent, with our world-class food and drink, world-class universities, world-class sectors like life sciences, video games, financial services, with an abundance of renewable energy, and Conference, most importantly, with a hard-working, gallus, talented people as our greatest asset, I ask the question, why not Scotland? But we are doing more than campaigning to win our independence. We are preparing for independence because we're building the institutions for delivery. Since 2014 in government, we've set up a new social security system, a tax agency, a national investment bank. We've expanded our overseas network with new offices in Berlin and Copenhagen. With Brexit, Westminster is isolating itself from the world. With the SNP, to paraphrase Winnie Ewing, Madame Écosse, Scotland is joining the world. Friends, we're going to take further steps that will both provide direct benefits under devolution and will also prepare us for independence. The UK has a shocking record on capital investment. As First Minister, I'm co-chair of the Scottish Government's investor panel, made up of a group of distinguished experts. They're challenging the Scottish Government to be bold. And that's why I'm announcing our most ambitious proposal yet. I can confirm. I will go again. I can confirm. That's how ambitious it is. It has left me speechless. I am delighted to announce our most ambitious proposal yet. I can confirm that by the end of this Parliament, the SNP government will, subject of course to due diligence and appropriate market testing, we will go directly to the international bond market for the first time in our own right. To fund vital infrastructure, projects like affordable housing, we will issue Scotland's first ever bond. This will bring Scotland to the attention of investors right across the world. It will raise our profile as a place where investment returns can be made. And in doing so, we will show the world not only that we're a country to invest in today, will also demonstrate the credibility to international markets that we will need when we're going to become an independent country. Delegates, the SNP is delivering for the people of Scotland, and brick by brick, institution by institution, we are laying the foundations for what will be our newly independent state. We are truly living in the early days of a better nation. Conference, when it comes to setting out our prospectus for a better Scotland, we'll be stepping up the pace. We've set out our macroeconomic framework, detailing currency policy. We've published plans for a written constitution, a constitution, of course, that would provide recognition, protection for the NHS in Scotland, giving the right to access a system of healthcare available free at the point of need. A constitution that recognises and protects employment rights, including, of course, the right to strike. And Conference, a constitution that, most importantly, would recognise that sovereignty will always sit with the people who live here, not with the House of Commons, and certainly not with the House of Lords. And precisely because our plan for a new economy will be at the heart of our new independence prospectus, we'll shortly bring forward our plans for migration. We'll set out our plans for industrial policy. We'll show how we can improve conditions for businesses and, crucially, for workers too. We'll show how we can encourage greater private sector investment in Scotland. Success for Scotland, it will not come automatically. We all know that. Our success will be determined by all of us as a country and by the decisions that we take. Do you know, Scotland's at its best when we are at our most confident. Just look at Steve Clarke's men, the magnificent Scotland men's team. In fact, Conference, given our men's team's scintillating run of form, can I say that by the time Scotland co-hosts Euro 2028, I look forward to defending Scotland's title as European champions. Conference, there's nothing wrong with being an optimist. Delegates, all too often, some people talk about Scotland's immense contribution to the world as if it's something that's over. But for me, Scotland has a lot more to offer tomorrow than we did yesterday. If we are willing to go on this journey together, then we can make sure that this is the case. Every single person living here can play their part in building a new Scotland. All of us will have a stake in our new country, and we all deserve to enjoy the fruits of that success. Let's remember that we in this party are the custodians of a cause that's far greater than all of us. In a world where it can be easy to feel powerless, there's no greater act of empowerment than to take our destiny into our own hands. And there is no greater gift that we can leave our children than a country which is theirs to create in their own image. Conference, that which we seek for our nation is neither unwise nor untested. It is neither unreasonable nor unobtainable. Rather, it has been the stated ambition of nations the world over for the simple reason that independence works. Nations today, which relative to Scotland's great age, are in many cases mere youngsters. And that, my friends, is the great irony about Scotland's journey towards independence. One of the world's oldest nations will become its youngest independent state. And with the vitality of youth, we can step out into that world anew, into the bright light of a new dawn, with our eyes wide open to a whole new world of possibility. Together, united, let's get out there and make it happen. Thank you, Conference.
Other exciting
Right, guys, we've got some work to get on with, so let's get out there and let's do everything we can to deliver independence for our nation. Let's do it.